Real quick before we get started, from our Bears That Snatch Up Little Kids episode, we received a message from Miss Amy who sent us a link to a BBC documentary where they show bears purring. So they actually do purr.
Interesting.
Yeah. And Atlas Unplugged from YouTube said something very interesting here. He said these bear things, it could be a Polish wood spirit known as a leshy, which is something I've never heard of. So we're definitely going to do a Quick and the Weird on that guy.
And for the people that don't know, the Quick and the Weird is a series that we do that's exclusive to Patreon, where we take weird cases that aren't long enough to be a full-length episode and release them on Patreon. Just a quick breakdown of the cases or the creature. We've tackled a few cases and some folklore creatures. So if that sounds enticing, then become a patron. We'd love to have you. Mateo will give you a back rub.
Yeah, I will.
He will.
You betcha.
So
good. Thank you, Miss Amy and Atlas, for commenting on our stuff and reaching out to us. It's cool to find that stuff. I'll add the video she sent along to our YouTube playlist. So if you want to hear a bear purr, go check it out. And thank Miss Amy. All right, back to the show. We'll get it started. Sorry, guys. Thank you. What's up, everybody? Thank you for listening to the Whatcast. We hope you are well. Mike, we're going to talk about some good old-fashioned Whatcast stuff, and that's alien abductions, but I hear you got a specific humdinger for us.
yeah, no dick nose aliens though. Unfortunately.
Oh.
Yeah, I know. There's a collective grumbling from the audience. I apologize, guys. The dick nose aliens aren't everywhere. You know, as much as we would love them to be everywhere, they're just not. You know, and other than that one time, I don't recall hearing them come up again. So
nope, it was just that one golden moment in time.
Yeah, we missed our window, guys. We'll never see those dick nose fuckers again. But I've got a story of a different type. So it's kind of your classic abduction story, but there's much more to it. I can't even remember how long. It was probably like 3 or 4 years ago now. We did a episode talking about the military abduction scenario.
Yeah.
Where the military might be behind the abduction scenario, and maybe it's tied to genetic engineering, maybe it's tied to the UFO cover-up, maybe it's a combination of the two. But
and might I add, and as things have unfolded since we've done that show, we're totally kidding. We don't think the military had anything to do with anything like that.
We're joking. There's no such thing as the military. Oh wait, I mean aliens. But this particular case to me could very well fit in there, and I think there could also be traces of the Richard Doty and Paul Benowitz type stuff.
Ooh,
yeah, and the man behind this whole well, I'm getting ahead of myself here. So there's this individual. A lot of people that are familiar with UFO and abduction researchers specifically are probably familiar with a UFO researcher named Daryl Sims. Daryl Sims is an ex-police officer, and he was also an ex-CIA officer who he ended up becoming a UFO researcher and dealt with abductees specifically. He had this weird method when he would be working with people that would come to him for that would feel like they were victims of a alien abduction experience. And he used hypnotic regression therapy, which is, we're all familiar with that that's typically how we get the information that we have regarding the abduction experience. But his plan was to also leave like a post-hypnotic suggestion in the people that are coming to him for help.
Oh, wow.
And so they're coming to him, and he's unlocking these memories, but then he's implanting this little kernel in their brain, so that if they're abducted again, this post-hypnotic suggestion will click in, and it's going to drive the victim to try to ask questions or get more information out of whoever's abducting them.
That's pretty brilliant.
Yeah. And he's got a history of working with these patients. He's also done a lot to try to recover alien implants that are put in people during abduction. And apparently he claims to have a lot of seemingly genuine unknown materials as a result of recovering these alien implants. But as with anybody like this, there's definitely the detractors, and you'll have people saying that he's full of shit and he's making this stuff up. He's preying on people with mental issues. There's people within the UFO community that are thinking because of his CIA background that he's a disinfo agent. So he's got this
stigma.
Yeah, where he's he seems to be providing a lot of information, but he's got people that are doubting his sincerity on both sides. But he during the summer of 1992, he actually became the chief abductions investigator for the Houston UFO network. So it's like the MUFON, but for just the city of Houston. And he ended up investigating a bunch of cases with people that were abducted in the Houston area specifically. And as part of his investigation into these abductions, he would enact his plan, where he would get together, or he would bring in the abductees, and then he would put them under with hypnosis. He specifically looked for people that had a long history of abduction. He wasn't looking for people that had only claimed one experience. He was looking for lifelong people that had lifelong experiences with either extraterrestrial communication, alien communication, whatever, or abduction experiences.
Noobs not apply.
Yeah, and the reason was, if they had a history of it, chances are they would be abducted again. So if he regressed them, went through the hypnosis they're already under, leaves a post-hypnotic suggestion, next time he's got the jump on them. So it's like he's creating spies in a way.
That's amazing. I can't get over that. Can you imagine being one of the aliens and just abducting someone and be like, whoa, Glopnar, something?
Yeah. Whoa, wait a second. Yeah. And I'll actually get into that a little bit later.
Oh, fuck yeah.
But in addition to asking questions of the abductors, they were also being tasked with trying to take in as much detail of their surroundings as possible. So he first tried this in November of 1991. And in all his reports, he designates the victims with a specific number. It would be silly for me to repeat the number because it's letters and numbers, and it's like 10 digits long, and it's a fucking mouthful. So I'm just going to refer to them as Abductee 1, Jimmy Jones, Lorraine Franklin, whatever I refer to them as, I don't know. But I'm not going to give them their number designation because that's just ridiculous. And none of you will get anything from it unless you've got like a photographic memory. And you're like, yes, I specifically remember that designation, and that designation is the one that did this. And, for you guys, good for you. But for everybody else, I'm just going to keep it easy. So in November of 1992, Sims had a patient come in who had suffered a recent abduction. And this particular patient had previously undergone the hypnotic suggestion treatment. And in part, at least according to the person who was abducted, it seemed to have worked. But when they got abducted, they managed to keep a clear memory of the beginning part of the experience. And they were able to retain their awareness and their memory much longer than they ever had. You know, typically it's like the classic, you see the light and you see the creatures and then you wake up in bed or whatever. But she was able to actually remember a lot of the incident. And she was able to try to communicate with the people with the beings that were abducting her. But they didn't really reveal anything. But she said that they tried to zap her again. She doesn't really go into detail about what the zap means, but I'm you can use your imagination, I'm sure. But they tried to zap her to maintain full control of her brain. And the more time that she was in their presence, she felt herself losing control of her own mind. But during her hypnotic regression, after this particular incident, she suddenly yelled out, "We know what you're doing. We know about," and then she was cut off. As it was like they knew and they were onto her, and they just like a click of a button clicked her off.
Yeah, turn her off before they trace it.
Yeah. That's exactly what it is. It's like trying to triangulate and trace a phone call and like hang up before they get us.
Yeah, everybody stop talking, turn it off.
So with this plan, he ended up working with a bunch of different people who had been abducted or had a long history of abduction. He was able to get them to undergo this hypnotic therapy to plant these suggestions in their brain. But the following month after this particular session, he began to notice that several of his patients that he had previously been working with had suffered an abduction. And in interviewing them, he found out that they were all abducted on the same night, which was December 8th, 1992.
What?
None of them knew each other. They had never met previously, and he interviewed each one independently, and they all shared very similar stories of what happened to them that night. So he interviewed one, we'll call her woman number one. The first woman, she said that she woke up with an intense irritation in her eye. And when she rubbed it, she noticed that this small dot fell out, and she thought it was a type of implant. Another one of the patients that he was seeing started experiencing nosebleeds following this incident on the 8th. And both contacted Sims. He regressed both of them, and they both told very similar stories. At this point, we're in mid-December of 1992. So he wanted to take it kind of step by step. And he first regressed them back to December 10th. And on December 10th, one of the patients said that he woke up to find these strange creatures in his room. And they moved to his bed, and they pulled something out of his nose. And then they left, and he fell back asleep. So Sims decided to go back further to the night of the reported abduction, December 8th. And again, this particular patient, we'll call him the first man. He was asleep, and like you typically are in the middle of the night, and then he got woken up by this bright flash. But he said there was no sound, so it wasn't a thunderstorm. It was just like this bright flash. and he noticed the only description he gave was a small gray alien that was in his room. And he said it was wearing either a harness or a utility belt or something like that. And then this voice entered his head, just like is typically reported by an abduction experiences. That's typically how these things communicate, is telepathically. But he heard this thing talking to him inside his head, and it told him to follow him outside. So for whatever reason, it's got to be some sort of hypnosis or something that makes people so compliant. But it told him to follow him outside, so he did. And once he got out there, he saw that there was a bright blue light that was shining on a spot on the ground outside of his house. And he stepped into the light, and instantly he was transported into a large round room. And as soon as he was aware of this room, a voice entered into his head and told him to take off all of his clothes. And then this little creature came out, took his clothes, and he followed the creature down this series of hallways. And he said in his memory, he doesn't remember how they moved down the hallways. He just knows that they moved. But he said he distinctly remembers at certain points where he was on the ship that he was walking, but he said most of the time they were moving by some unknown means. So maybe it was like telekinesis and they were just kind of like floating. I don't know. That's kind of weird. But as he was going down the hallways, they entered into a few different rooms. And he said in one room, there were these alien creatures that would conduct physical examinations. And when he was getting this physical examination done, he noticed that there was another human in the room. And the other human came over to him and started asking questions, how he remembered that he had previous abductions. But he also asked how these patients under Sims had come into contact with one another, and asked why they would want to meet with each other, which seems kind of weird.
Yeah.
But I've heard in a lot of abduction cases where there will be like a human there who will kind of act weird, like maybe it's a disguise or something.
Right.
But if you're going through the military abduction scenario, they also often have a human there with these aliens. And if that's the case, then it could be like a military interrogation sort of thing where they want to know why these people remember, like why aren't what we're doing, it seems to be ineffective. Why are you able to break through our programming? You're not supposed to remember any of this, yet you do. Why? And then how did you guys all find each other? And, is it coincidence? Maybe they're trying to track down Daryl Sims. Or maybe Daryl Sims is part of it. And the hypnosis and the post-hypnotic suggestions are all part of this abduction experience. Maybe it was all something that he created and he's fucking with people's brains to have these false memories.
Right. I mean, doing that's a parlor trick when it comes to hypnosis. It's hot. You're cold. Dance like a chicken,
Yeah. And so, I mean, who knows? And I remember mentioning in that episode we did on the military abductions that this could potentially tie in with like whatever the evolution of MK Ultra was, where they're still experimenting with the human consciousness and trying to figure things out about it.
Right.
But kind of in that vein, while the first man was being abducted, a model of the human brain was presented to him, and he was asked to show where the subconscious mind is located in the brain.
Ooh, that's weird.
Yeah.
Wow. I wonder why they want to study that.
That's another thing. Like I remember reading a lot of stuff about aliens asking where the soul is housed.
Whoa.
like humans have souls. Like, is that part of the abduction thing? And that if so, that makes me think it's more probably not aliens, probably something else, like maybe the jinn or demons.
Yeah, maybe there's some type of harvesting going on that we're not noticing.
Or maybe like, what if it's like the mythology that we had been led to believe is just like old myths and stuff is real? And like, what if mankind was given a soul, and there's these other creatures that God created that don't have a soul, and because they weren't created with a soul, they want to know about ours, so they create this whole experience, and it's just being perceived as being alien because it's so fucking weird.
Right. Well, I mean, what if these jinn just have been trying to do this so long, they figured out the best and most efficient way to do this is to build these craft and snatch people while they're sleeping? What do we know?
Yeah, we don't know. Maybe that's also tied in with the incubus succubus thing. Yeah, I mean, I really feel like the alien abduction scenario is just an evolution of something that's been happening for a while, and we're just putting an alien spin on it now because that's, we're living in the space age now.
I mean, I have to admit that when I heard abduction stories, and we've talked about how much validity hypnosis has, for each of us, but I've never considered anything else going on other than them making this shit up, or they were abducted by aliens by what they described, until you brought up the military abduction experiment stuff. But there's so many cases. There's a case that I'll get into in a little bit that it points out a bunch of interesting things about abduction. But does the whole, well, one, it's not too off subject, but I've been wanting to ask you, I think it was Delago who put in the Discord, there's these videos that are popping up where people are debunking the videos that the government are releasing. Have you heard anything about that, or what do you think about that?
Yeah, so the video that you're referring to, it's a channel on YouTube called The Corridor Crew, and they're a bunch of visual effects artists that they mostly put out like they'll do they do like a lot of their own shorts and stuff, or they'll take shitty CGI scenes from movies and make it better. They do a lot of like visual effects breakdowns from various movies. Like it's very visual effects and CGI oriented. And they took a look at the most famous videos, the Tic Tac, the green pyramid things, and one of the other, I think it was the Go Fast video. But they were describing everything that they were seeing, and a lot of what they were saying, like I've really haven't been all that impressed with the official government videos that are being released. I thought that the pyramid one was the most interesting, and it definitely looked cool, and it looked legit. It really did look legit. But when you hear them break it down, they explain why this is taking on the pyramid shape and exactly what it is. We should put that in the notes and add it to the YouTube playlist, because it's definitely a really informative video, and these guys don't have an agenda. They're just visual effects artists that are looking at this and breaking it down based on their knowledge of the way cameras work and how perspective works and things like that. So it's definitely worth a watch. But I do think, and since the whole To the Stars Academy thing and the government disclosure thing, I've been very skeptical of all of this stuff that's coming out. And now with Jeremy Corbell involved with it, it really stinks. It smells very fishy, and it's weird because that Jeremy Corbell dude was like, I felt like he was super reliable way back in the day. Like when he first started doing his shit, like he was coming out with some crazy shit, but now it's like he got a taste of the big time with the Bob Lazar documentary, and I feel like now he's a shill for all this government disclosure stuff.
Right. We might just feel that way because we expect that to happen to people when they're talking about this stuff. I don't know, but
he was the one that released that pyramid video, and the way that it's explained from a camera standpoint is that these were most likely just regular planes, and it's the way that the camera was picking up on the lights and the resolution on the camera with it being in night vision, the way that the light hit the lens made it appear like a pyramid.
Right.
They explain it all, and it makes perfect sense, and I could see, why they would start doing this. And again, we've talked about this before, but it's a good way to create plausible deniability when you're testing new aircraft out. You just point to UAPs. We said that there's UAPs, so we can't explain it. You can't explain it. It's a UAP.
Right. I think a lot of people are failing to recognize how many industries are utilizing the internet for reactionary purposes. I thought it was funny this might be off subject for some people, but me and Mike love this shit. But in Daredevil, when they did the first season of Daredevil, me and you both watched that intently and enjoyed the shit out of it, but we both complained about his mask. And so did everybody on the internet. And they fixed that before the first season was done. They did that with Spider-Man. They kept threatening that they weren't going to do any more Spider-Man. Sony was going to take the rights back. And they said that to sit back and watch what people had to say about it. And people were pissed off. And they said, oh, what are we going to do? Say no to another fucking $1 billion Spider-Man movie? So they did that. So maybe they started doing that with those SpaceX rockets that kept flying all over the place a few years ago. You remember when that one flew over California? We talked about that.
Yeah. The big
swirly do thing.
Well, yeah. And it wasn't that seen across a few different states that night.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. I do recall that.
So yeah, maybe that is what's going on.
Yeah. And I mean, it could also be combined with like use of some experimental drugs to help make the victim more compliant and manageable. I don't know. I don't know what sort of shenanigans they get up to behind the scenes, but I'm sure it's nefarious.
What if all the political unrest we're seeing here, like not socially, although there is social unrest, of course, but the actual governmental unrest is because whatever deal we've made with aliens, we're literally like starting to pay up, and it's causing chaos.
Yeah, and then they're pushing the UAP thing because at some point they're gonna be sending these crazy aircraft over to just start offing people.
I was thinking that abduction reports would increase, and then people would just start like not coming back from being abducted.
Yeah.
And it would be just commonplace.
These weird aircraft were seen in the area, and then people disappear.
Yeah, it'll gone. It'll like start to look like the world that exists in Hunger Games. This weird hovering craft will come in, and everybody will hide, and it'll leave. You'll be like, "Fuck! I wonder how many they got this time."
Yeah, or they start out small, just take the heads of the opposition, but then it's like, you know what? We're gonna just destroy huge population centers now because aliens are evil, guys. Seriously, aliens are evil. Really, it's us. It's us. We're the aliens. We're blowing everything up. But seriously, guys, aliens are so bad. They suck so hard.
You've seen Independence Day. You know what they want to do.
Yeah, they hate our way of life. That's the thing. They're jealous of our freedom, and they're gonna blow up America.
Yeah, that's a very interesting case, though. What a genius idea. That's something that, like, in retrospect, you go, damn, I wish while he was hypnotizing these people, he put like some trigger, like some information collecting trigger in their minds, just in case they were abducted again. And that's exactly what he did.
Yeah, and he was able to get even more information than that. So as the first man abduction guy was being led through the ship, he was brought to this room it was this huge, large, round room. But he said that it was different from the previous large round room, and it had different sort of lighting. And he said there was furniture there, but it was laid out in a different way from the rest of the places he had been. But he said he saw different types of alien creatures in the room. And he said there were gray aliens, the weird human that was asking him questions, and then there were 2 tall brown aliens. So he didn't really describe them beyond saying tall and brown, so I'm just going to say that they were Wookiees.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to go with. That's what I pictured.
Safe bet, man. So gray aliens, a human, and a couple of Wookiees.
Wow.
And again, these voices popped into his head asking about the subconscious part of the human brain. And as they were questioning him about the subconscious, he kept getting these weird visions of what he believed to be other people that had been abducted by these beings. And Sims had asked him to describe them, and some of them matched the descriptions of other patients that Sims had. But this guy did not know these other patients. But then he noticed that all of the other people that he was getting visions of were in this room with him. And they were all naked, but they were in this weird trance state. And he got the feeling that none of them were aware that any of the other ones were in the room. And he got the feeling that the abductors were prying into the minds of those people that were in the trance. And somehow, because he was able to maintain control of, at least part of his mind, he somehow was able to tap into this mental debate that 2 of these beings were having. And he said that they were arguing whether or not the experiment should continue or if it had been compromised. And, that would have been in reference to him still being aware and still have, not being under their trance.
That's terrifying.
So as he's picking up on this, this is where he comes to the conclusion that the other people in this room that are in the trance are completely unaware of everything else that's going on around him. And he said as his thought occurred, that weird human character walked over to him again and took hold of his hands and looked at him. And he said when that happened, it blocked out any other sort of, it blocked out his ability to pick up on any of the other mental conversations. But he was asked, and this is according to his regression records, he was asked if he knew of Project Prometheus, but he had never heard of it before. But at that point in time, there was no such thing as Project Prometheus. But in 2003, NASA did launch a project called Project Prometheus, which was trying to use nuclear-powered space propulsion in the hopes that they would be able to figure out a way for long-term space flight.
That sounds like a horrible idea. We sent a nuke into deep space?
No, they were using it as a propulsion system.
Well, I mean, if something goes wrong, that can blow up and be catastrophe.
Yeah. I mean, if you're in deep space, I think blowing up in a instant ball of nuclear goo is probably better than most of the alternatives related to space death.
Well, maybe that's Total Recall taught us all about that. But yeah. Maybe
to say nothing of potential starvation or dehydration.
Maybe something went wrong with this thing and it destroyed part of a planet in the future, and they've come back and they're trying to figure out about this program or project.
Maybe. And maybe they just but then again, it could also just be part of this whole disinformation thing. This case isn't super well known, so if NASA was or whoever controls NASA is in on it. They're like, oh, watch this. We're gonna tie it back for the super nerds, and they're gonna, it's like a little bit of fan service to the geeks that like to do the deep dives.
Right.
It's like this is a B-side for you guys. Like, yeah, Project Prometheus. Oh my god.
Yeah, my theory doesn't hold water. I don't think the typical abduction stories and reports are good enough, like revenge for partial planetary destruction. Can you imagine the aliens like get them and they're like, cool, here they are, get naked.
Yeah. We're going to massage your brain and finger your butthole. Just try to relax.
That's their revenge for half their planet being gone.
Yep. Good old finger in the pooper and a brain massage.
The alien special.
Yeah. The old 1-2. But there's one other room that was reported among many of the victims that were abducted on that night on December 8th, 1992. And this one, to me, is one of the creepier ones. And I don't recall hearing anything like this in other cases, but I could be wrong, or maybe I've forgotten, or maybe I just haven't seen it. I don't know. If you've heard anything like it, let me know. But they reported this room that was set up kind of like a museum. And in this museum were animals as well as humans from across all ages. And they said there were humans from different cultures all over the world, but also in different periods of time.
Ooh.
And they got the impression that these humans and animals were real, actual humans and animals, but they weren't dead. They got the feeling that they were alive and trapped in suspended animation.
Oh, so they weren't like in a Twilight Zone episode, like in
Right.
a cage walking around?
No, they were perfectly still.
Oh, wow.
Just like frozen in place.
No, I've never heard of anything like that. That's even more terrifying.
Yeah. And then being led there like this could be you. And then you've got fucking Chewbacca over there in the corner waggling his fingers, or you can take the fingers.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know. Suspended animation for eternity or Wookiee fisting. Ugh.
I'm going with the Wookiee.
Well, you also like to fuck sharks, so that's not a surprise.
Yep, I would just clap and be like, all right, let's broaden the horizons. I don't want to be frozen in time forever.
All right, Wookiee, at least give me some spit.
Oh, Christ. He's all, nope. And I promptly die.
Yeah, and that is that. But I don't know. The fact that we've got an ex-CIA agent involved who is doing post-hypnotic suggestions, openly stating that he's doing, but, saying that the purpose of it is for to communicate with these beings or so that they can remember more. But who knows, man? Who knows what the fuck he's doing, messing with people's brains. He could have a hand in this whole experience.
Right.
They come to him and he's like, oh, let me regress you and then put these ideas in your head.
It's interesting that his credentials are so important, even though they're not what we think. Like, they're for the bad guy. He's not like a specialist in aerial sightings or flight patterns. He's a former CIA guy. And so that's always going to be a blemish on this case for me. I mean, he used to play ball for the other team.
Yeah, who's to say he's still not?
Yeah, we know they've done stuff like that before.
I would have to think if he's a CIA officer, he definitely would have had to have security clearance. And I would think that they would likely keep tabs on him if he's involved in this sort of thing. The CIA has had a history of having a hand in some of the UFO investigations. And George H.W. Bush was the director of the CIA and oversaw or according to a lot of people, hid a lot of evidence that might support the idea that UFOs were real.
Really?
Yeah. So, with this guy being an ex-CIA officer who would have had to undergo government security clearance, I would really have to believe that if he's looking into UFOs and the abduction experience and doing all of these experiments and working with people who have been abducted, that I would have to think that the CIA would be aware of all of this and be keeping tabs on it.
Right.
If for nothing else, because of, they could say Homeland Security and that UFOs could help spring a cult or something, like a UFO cult. And so we've got to monitor to make sure that a cult doesn't form up around this whole UFO experience.
Oh, yeah. You don't even have to get that weird. It's that they may hold sensitive information or something like that. That's all it takes.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no way this dude isn't being monitored and that they're not aware of what he's doing.
Yeah, I agree.
So I don't know. Like, it's the fact that everyone was abducted on the same night, December 8th, had an implant put in, and then 2 days later, they were abducted sort of again and had the implant taken out. I don't know. It seems weird. It doesn't, like, to me, I never really bought into the abduction thing being aliens. I never wanted to say that the people experiencing it weren't experiencing a real thing. But I just never thought it was aliens. It never felt right to me, which is weird to say considering we're talking about fucking aliens. But, like, hey, what I know of aliens is they would never abduct you. They just want to eat you or be friends with us and sell you butt crystals. But it's, it just never seemed to be something that was legitimate. And again, not saying that the people experiencing it didn't actually experience it. I think in a lot of cases they did experience it. I just think they were led to believe that it was a certain type of event when something else entirely was going on. In some cases, I'm sure you've got people that had a really vivid dream and then they wake up and the dream just seems so real that they're like, oh, fuck, that was an actual abduction. Or then you've got the people who make shit up for attention. You've also got to factor in mental illness as a possibility as well. But that's not going to cover every single case. And there's plenty of sane people that have been abducted and have had abduction experiences. And once I did the research on the military abductions, that really kind of made things so much more clear because of like the weirdness that the abduction event takes on. Like when you listen to the descriptions by victims, it always seems to have like this dreamlike quality. Like it's so surreal. And you could argue, yeah, well, it's because they're aliens. Sure. Or it's because it's a simulated memory. So it takes on this weird kind of hazy thing because it was all constructed in your brain while under hypnosis and maybe also the influence of psychedelics.
Yeah, the military abduction stuff was very, very interesting to me. And like I said, it was something I hadn't considered. But just the descriptions of these things and by so many people for so long, these people who are going through these abductions, I've always believed that it's got to be some type of alien or some type of creature, whatever you want to call it, a non-human. But I also have always felt that to be able to do this to people, it has to be allowed to happen. So I've always felt that there's cooperation when it comes to abductions and even aliens in general.
Yeah, if it's a thing, so you have to look at it, I guess, from all sides. Because there is that old conspiracy theory that Eisenhower made a deal with the Greys to allow them to abduct people. And then they're like, all right, we can abduct this many per year, but instead we're going to take 10 times that amount. And there's nothing you can do because we're giving you technology, but we're not giving you all of the technology. And then he's like, fuck. But then there's the possibility that this is all just stuff that's spawning out of MK Ultra, and that this is all completely human backed. There's no aliens, there's no jinn. It's all people just completely being invasive and stealing DNA and fucking with people's brains and putting in post-hypnotic suggestions and implants. And that one to me is scarier than aliens, because that's entities that we trust with our protection doing this without our consent.
Absolutely.
But the other option is that it's more of a spiritual thing, and that at no point in time is your body actually being left, but you're experiencing some sort of like you're entering a
astral abduction.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe these so-called implants that are being left behind are actually some sort of like deposit from when your astral body left, and it just somehow this weird build up in the body. Because I remember when we covered that documentary about the doctor that removed the implants, he said a lot of them had organic material as their basis. So what if that is the case? What if it's like part of the I don't know, like residue or just something left behind when you're taken astrally or spiritually?
Some type of scarring from a forced evacuation.
Yeah, or like I don't want to say ectoplasm because that's silly, but like something like that. Like you're leaving your body, you're being forced out of your body and then forced back in at some point, and it's like a astral or a spiritual scar that somehow becomes physical as you enter your body or re-enter your body.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's definitely a weird case though, and I think it falls right in there with some of the stuff we've talked about before, even though it's got the added connection of the post-hypnotic suggestions. I would be interested in more of these hypnotic regression doctors that deal with victims of lifelong abduction, if they would do this. Like, it'd be interesting to see if we could get similar results from different doctors.
When you told me what you were going to cover for this week's episode, I took a quick look, and serendipitously, one of my favorite YouTube channels put out a video about extraordinary experiences with aliens and UFOs and stuff like that. And they highlighted a case that I hadn't heard of, but I found particularly interesting because they got a pretty heavy dude to do the investigating. And this is about a dude named Peter Faust, who in 1989, 1990 had a dream, or what he could only call a dream. To him, it was much more than just a dream. It was too vivid, too violating to be just something that happened in his sleep. But he had this memory as an adult, and he couldn't shake this dream or the feeling that it was something more. So he eventually ended up being treated by Harvard graduated Pulitzer Prize winning professor and psychiatrist John E. Mack. Now, from what I understand, this guy's no fucking joke. He's laid down like pretty much the modern pipe works for child psychology. It was interesting to see how he got involved. He does hypnosis as well, and he put Peter through several regression sessions just like your case did, and they found all the classic weird shit. He was asleep in bed. There was a flash of light. He was outside floating up towards a craft. He talked about them taking samples of his semen and them producing fetuses with it. He got to do a little bit of David Huggins action and actually recalled him having sex with a female alien. And unfortunately, they didn't give him the luxury of like some type of half-breed, half-woman alien. It was just a female.
Was it a Wookiee?
No, he mentioned, he said, he didn't say what they look like from what I saw. He just said that they didn't look like what Hollywood depicts them as. Now, this Johnny Mac guy wrote a book about it, which I couldn't get in time for the show, but I definitely want to get my hands on it. And he writes all about this stuff, but he just talked about how they unlocked all these memories of all this shit that happened to him starting at the age of 8. But what struck me so much with this case is that this Mac guy was involved. After you look up his credentials, he's no joke. And he gave a list of reasons. There's an interview, and it's almost one of the only things I can find on this case from Oprah, believe it or not. This John Mack guy is so well known and so renowned that he was able just to get on Oprah's show with this new book he wrote about this case. And she asked him why he got involved in something like this. And I found this fascinating with somebody with his credentials. He said, one, there's hundreds and thousands, if not millions of reports from all over the country of the same thing going on by people who don't know each other. So that there's something definitely happening, he says. Two, it's reported in children as young as 2 or 3 years old that are talking about people coming into the room and taking them and stuff like that. And he says that pretty much rules out any personality explanations. And 3, I found this one interesting because this kind of lines up with that report they put out about the UAPs, is that these things are having multiple observers. When they see these craft, there's not just the people saying that they saw it, there's other people who witness it. So that backs them up. A lot of these cases leave physical evidence like implants, like you said, and scars and markings on their body. And after everybody he's examined, these abductees are found to be completely sound of mind with no psychological disturbances at all. And he also says these repressed memories that they find through regression therapy, hypnosis, they're not caused by psychosis, madness, dreams, or fantasy. When he's doing this with these subjects, they're not talking about their dog Fluffy from when they were 5. They're running into traumatic, repressed memories. So traumatic events are what create these hidden regression memories. So he believes that something has to be going on there. I thought about that for a minute and I talked to my wife about it, and I asked her what she thought about it. She studied psychology for many years, and she said that it's been proven that our bodies will ignore trauma. And in dangerous situations, people getting shot, stabbed, and not knowing it, we know that happens. And I said, yeah, to survive. And she said, no, it doesn't have to be life or death. We know that this happens to people, and your body will do this just to protect itself. And we have to assume that the mind will do the same thing. I mean, isn't that what like adrenaline is? Isn't that what that's for?
I don't know if it's necessarily there to help us forget, but
just to cope. I mean,
yeah, we do see time and time again, though, people that have undergone trauma that find ways to block it out. Some people compartmentalize it. Some people end up having, such severe trauma that they can't deal with it. Their brain will literally fracture into multiple personalities in order to properly deal with it.
Yeah, I always use the Ted Bundy story as an example of that. I'm sure everybody's tired of me telling, but it's just a shocking example. And again, an example of how your mind will deal with trauma. So who knows what's actually happening to these people? But I don't know. I definitely think something's going on. I just don't know if it's Chewbacca wanting to play Check the Oil or government agents. But it just seems like so many sound people are going through this. I looked up this Peter Faust guy to see if I can find any other interviews on him. I did find out that he refused to talk about his abduction stuff later in life. He was commented as saying that he didn't believe in UFOs or aliens, and he, in a way, doesn't now, and that him going through this didn't benefit him in any way. He got nothing out of it. I did find an interview with him and his wife for another YouTube channel, but they weren't talking about his abduction. They were talking about family astrology, I guess is the best way to put it. So he wasn't talking about the end of the world. Let me see if I can find it. Gets a little foo-fooey. Let me try to find this paper. I wrote the title of the course, the conference that they were talking about that they were going to put on.
Was it Crystal Humpers Anonymous?
Almost. It was Awakening to the Soul Consciousness, the Potentiality of Family Constellations.
Through humping butt crystals.
Featuring butt crystals. So, I mean, I don't know. It seemed like if it was more of his wife's show, but he was talking just as much as she was. And I don't, they weren't too hippie-ish about it, I guess. Not to diss hippies. I'm not talking trash, but it didn't seem like he was linking what he was doing now with his experience. You know, I mean, they said that he was eventually practiced therapy himself. So he's still a professional person, somebody of sound mind. But I found that to be interesting to hear those comments made by that bigwig psychotherapist fella.
I always like when someone with legit scientific credentials will admittedly say that this isn't just something silly.
Yeah.
They're legitimately curious by what they're seeing and hearing about.
Right. That's what drew me to hearing that this story is that this guy is very highly regarded and everybody's willing to listen to everything he says before, and he's winning awards and he went to Harvard and all this good stuff that makes you a believable person and looked up to by society. And then he just starts talking about aliens. He writes a book called Abduction, all about this guy's case and other people's cases that he's studied. And his end result is something's definitely happening here. Something's going on. There should be no reason why a 48-year-old dude in Michigan talks about an experience where he's alone in his bed and he's blinded by a bright light, and all of a sudden there's 3 figures in his room and they walk him outside to a waiting craft at the same time as a 4-year-old kid saying that glowing men came into his room and took him outside to a white sun that was low to the ground. You know, those things shouldn't be happening if something wasn't going on. Another thing he said I found interesting is that Oprah asked him, they asked Peter, you know, why should we believe you? Do you understand how crazy this sounds to us as people who haven't experienced this? Why isn't this a publicity stunt? Why aren't we just going to accept it as that? And John Mack replied he said, you have no idea how hard it is to get somebody who's gone through this to publicly speak about it. He said, this isn't a club that anybody wants to be a part of. I can't get people to come talk about this. And that was interesting to hear one of the most renowned people, you know, he's written books and papers and theses and theories and blah, 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 blah. When he wants to do a study, he gets to do whatever the fuck he wants. And for, you know, people not to want to even talk to him about what they've experienced is, you know, publicly, or let anybody know about it publicly, I found very interesting as well. Maybe that's something we should consider more when we do hear about people telling you stories. It's we had somebody on a long time ago talk about their story, and it definitely wasn't a fun fucking time. I just wish I knew what was actually going on. Like you said, I hope it's not clandestine black-suited military groups sneaking into people's houses, pumping their ACs full of knockout gas and doing this shit.
Yeah, I hope not, but I think that the possibility is very real.
Dun dun dun.
Thank you for listening to the Whatcast. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, iTunes, and YouTube. Enjoy the podcast. Get yourself a Whatcast t-shirt or a sticker pack. Who was that dude on that one episode? Try the links in Homie's page. All this and more can be found at www.thewhatcasters.com. Thanks again for listening and have a great week.